I had to turn back from the airport. I'd forgotten my passport at home. But what I overheard through an open window between my daughter and my son-in-law changed my life forever. It was impossible to believe what my own ears were processing. I had planned this trip for months. Everything was perfectly organized, but a simple oversight brought me back to the exact moment to discover the most painful truth of my existence. My heart pounded as I hurried up the steps of my own home, the home I had built with so much love and sacrifice over decades. I never imagined I'd return like this, with trembling hands, searching through my papers for the one document that would allow me to escape my routine for a few precious days. The taxi was waiting outside, its engine humming. The driver glanced impatiently at his watch, but I had to find that damn passport, which I was sure was in my desk drawer. I rushed upstairs, a little out of breath, at 66. I no longer have the agility I once did, but the excitement of the trip gave me strength. It was my first solo getaway in years, a Mediterranean cruise I'd booked after months of saving every penny. My late husband, Roberto, always told me I deserved to see the world, but we never had the chance. Now, 3 years after his passing, I had finally worked up the courage to fulfill that dream. I slipped in through the back door, trying not to make a sound. My daughter Gabriela and her husband Diego were visiting, as they did every Sunday, and I didn't want them to know I'd returned. I knew my daughter would worry unnecessarily, maybe even try to convince me to cancel the trip. She has always been overprotective, especially since I became a widow. I tiptoed up the stairs toward my bedroom, where my desk held all my important documents. The passport had to be there, in the second drawer, along with the insurance policies and bank papers. Everything was perfectly organized, just as my parents had taught me. But just as I reached the second floor, their voices drifted clearly from the living room. My bedroom window overlooked the garden where they were sitting, drinking coffee at the wrought iron table Roberto had bought for our 20th wedding anniversary. At first, I thought it was a normal conversation, the kind young couples have about their plans. Gabriela was speaking in that soft voice she always uses when she's nervous. And Diego responded with his usual calculated tone, one that had always made me feel a little uneasy, though I never admitted it, not even to myself. But the words that followed made my blood run cold. I stood frozen by the window, hidden behind the lace curtains I had sewn myself years ago. My breathing grew ragged, and I felt as if the floor was shifting beneath my feet. "We can't wait any longer, Gabriela," Diego said, with a firmness I had never heard from him before. "Your mother is too healthy for her age. She could easily live another 10 or 15 years. We can't keep waiting that long." My daughter responded with a deep sigh, as if she had been carrying a great weight for a long time. "I know, Diego, but it scares me. She's my mother, after all. Although lately I feel like I don't even recognize her anymore." "That's exactly why," he continued. "She's starting to make decisions on her own, like this ridiculous trip. What's next? Maybe she'll marry some old man from her book club. We can't let her squander our future on the whims of old age." The words hit me like punches to the gut. Our future. Whims of old age. What were they talking about? My mind raced, trying to process what I was hearing, but a part of me refused to accept the reality of such cruel words. "The lawyer says if we can prove she's losing her mental faculties, we can get legal guardianship," Diego went on. "And once we have control of her finances, we can make the decisions that truly matter. This house is worth a fortune, and with her savings, we could finally buy the apartment we want." Gabriela was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. I held my breath, clinging to the curtains, praying my daughter would say no, that this was wrong, that she would never do such a thing to her own mother. But her next words destroyed my world. "You're right, my love. I've already spoken with Dr. Ramirez. He's willing to sign the necessary papers. He says that at her age, it's easy to argue cognitive decline, especially if we can show erratic behaviors like this sudden trip." I struggled to breathe. My legs were shaking so violently that I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. These were my loved ones, my only daughter, and the man she had chosen as her life partner, coldly planning how to strip me of everything I had built through decades of honest work. The taxi horn blared outside, interrupting my thoughts. The driver was getting impatient, probably thinking I'd changed my mind about the trip. But I was no longer thinking about cruises or passports. I could only think of those terrible words, of a betrayal I could never have imagined was possible. For 50 years, I had constructed a life I thought was perfect, as orderly as a Swiss watch. Each morning I rose at 6, prepared coffee in the same white porcelain cup Roberto had given me on our first anniversary, and began a daily routine that never wavered. I was a respected woman in the neighborhood, known for my punctuality, my immaculate garden, and my ability to host the best family gatherings. My house was my pride. Every corner reflected years of meticulous care. The plants in the garden thrived because I watered them religiously every afternoon at 5. The furniture gleamed because I polished it every Tuesday and Friday. Important documents were filed by date in the mahogany desk that had belonged to my father. Roberto and I had worked tirelessly to build this legacy. He as an accountant for a textile company for 30 years, I as a primary school teacher for 25 years. We never had extravagant luxuries, but we never wanted for anything. We saved every penny, calculated every expense, and planned every investment, always thinking of Gabriella's future. When our daughter was born, I felt that life was finally complete. She grew up with the certainty that she would be a successful and, above all, a good person. I taught her values, principles, the importance of honest work, and respect for others. When she finished university with honors, Roberto and I wept with emotion at her graduation ceremony. I remember her in a mint green dress on that radiant day, hugging us and saying that everything she had achieved was thanks to our example and dedication. She promised that one day she would repay all the effort we had invested in her. I never imagined that repayment would be to snatch away everything I owned. She met Diego when she was 28. He was an accountant like Roberto, handsome, polite, with a promising future. I liked him at first. He seemed genuinely in love with my daughter. Roberto approved of him immediately, saying he reminded him of himself as a young man. They married in a small, elegant ceremony in our garden. I thought they had found true love, just as Roberto and I had decades before. The first years of their marriage seemed like a fairy tale. After Roberto's death 3 years ago, I felt my world collapse. Gabriela and Diego were my support during those difficult times. They came every day, brought me food, and stayed to keep me company. Gradually, I began to regain my will to live. I started tending my garden again, resumed my routines, and joined a local book club at Gabriela's suggestion. Life began to have color again. When I told them about my travel plans, their reaction was strange. They showed not excitement, but concern. They said it was dangerous for a woman my age to travel alone, that it was better to wait. But I had made up my mind. For the first time in decades, I wanted to do something just for myself. I felt free, independent. I never suspected that this newfound independence was precisely what was fueling the sinister plans I had just overheard. The problem is she's still too lucid. Diego continued as I remained hidden behind the curtains, my world crumbling with every word. But Dr. Ramirez says that doesn't matter. With a few testimonies of erratic behavior and her age, we can get a declaration of mental incompetence without much trouble. Gabriela sighed. And what if she finds out what we're doing? You know my mother, Diego. She's shrewder than she looks. That's why we have to act fast, he replied, his coldness chilling me to the bone. If we present the case correctly, showing that she's making impulsive decisions, like wasting money on unnecessary trips, we can argue her judgment is impaired. The words stabbed at my chest like daggers. Unnecessary trips. Impaired judgment. How could they speak of me this way? How could my own daughter be planning to destroy my life so cruelly? I've also spoken to Isabel, Gabriela added, mentioning my best friend from the book club. I told her I was worried because Mom has been acting strange lately, getting confused with dates, repeating the same stories. My heart stopped. Isabel was my confidant. Gabriela had been poisoning our friendship with lies about my mental health. For how long had she been weaving this web of deceit behind my back? Excellent, Diego approved. We need it to look like a pattern of worrying behavior. What else can you get? Well, she mused, we could talk to Mrs. Carmen next door. She's always been a bit of a gossip. If I tell her I'm worried about Mom's mental health, she'll surely start inventing things she's noticed. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. They weren't just planning to steal my assets. They were systematically destroying my reputation, my support network, everything that gave me a sense of belonging. Perfect, Diego said. And don't forget to document anything strange she does. If she gets up in the middle of the night, forgets to pay a bill, mixes up a name, it can all be used as evidence. My stomach churned as I realized that for months, maybe years, my own daughter had been watching me like a predator, waiting for any normal human slip-up to use against me. And what about the house? Gabriela asked. Once we have guardianship, we can sell it easily. We'll say it's too big for her, that she needs to be in a safer place with specialized care. No one will question that decision, especially if she's already been declared incompetent. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I wiped them away quickly. I couldn't let them see me cry. This house was more than property. It was the home where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd loved my husband. And then, what do we do with her? Gabriella asked, her voice as casual as if she were discussing the weather. There are several options, Diego replied. We could find an affordable nursing home, one of those subsidized by the government. Her pension and what's left after selling the house should be enough to keep her comfortable. Comfortable. They spoke of locking me away in an asylum as if I were a piece of old furniture they no longer needed. Although, on second thought, Diego continued, maybe a private, more distant facility would be better. That way we won't have to visit so often, and she can't cause trouble with old neighbors or acquaintances. Gabriella laughed, a short, bitter sound I had never heard from her. You're right. The farther away, the better. Then we can live in peace. The plan was diabolically perfect. They would isolate me from my entire world, from anyone who might believe my side of the story. They would turn me into a confused, abandoned old woman in a strange place, while they enjoyed everything Roberto and I had built. When do we start? Gabriella asked, an eagerness in her voice that froze my blood. Next week, while she's on her trip. We can start moving some things, go through her papers, maybe even take some jewelry and valuables without her noticing right away. The taxi horn blared again, more insistent this time. I needed time to think, to plan. I couldn't confront them now. I needed to be smart, strategic. They thought I was a naive old woman, easy to manipulate. They were about to find out they had gravely underestimated Elvira. My mind raced, replaying conversations from the past few months, now seeing them in a completely different light. The times Gabriella had casually commented on my supposed confusion. The times Diego had insisted on helping me with my bank accounts. The concerned looks they exchanged, which I had mistaken for love, were actually a conspiracy. I remembered the doctor's visit last week. He had shown up unannounced, saying Gabriella had called him, worried. He asked strange questions about my memory. It wasn't a consultation. It was an evaluation to build their case. Their voices interrupted my painful thoughts as they prepared to leave. Remember, love, Diego said, we have to keep acting like the perfect daughter and son-in-law until everything is legal. I know, Gabriella replied. It's getting harder to fake affection when I see her wasting money on things like that trip. But you're right. We have to keep up appearances. Fake affection. For years, I had believed their hugs, their kisses, their I love yous were genuine. Now I knew it had all been an elaborate performance. I heard the front door close, their car start, and the sound fade into the distance. Only then did I allow myself to collapse onto the bed, my body trembling. The taxi was still waiting. I had to go down and cancel, make up an excuse. But as I moved toward the window, an idea began to form. What if I didn't cancel the trip? What if I used their plan to go through my things as an opportunity to watch them without them knowing? What if I pretended to be the naive old woman they believed I was, while I gathered proof of their betrayal? They wanted to play dirty. I would teach them what it meant to face a woman with nothing left to lose. I walked down the stairs with firm, determined steps. The taxi driver looked relieved when I appeared at the door with my bright red suitcase and a smile that, though forced, must have seemed convincing. Sorry for the delay, I said calmly. I'm ready for the airport. At the airport, I called my friend Isabel from a payphone. Isabel, dear, I began casually. I'm about to leave, but I wanted to ask you something. Have you noticed anything strange about me lately? There was an awkward pause. Well, Elvira, she said, Gabriella did come to see me. She was very worried about you. She said you'd been a bit confused. Confused how exactly? She said you repeat stories. Forget where you put things. She also mentioned this trip, saying it was impulsive and not like you. Every word confirmed the depth of their deception. After hanging up, I bought a small, discreet audio recorder. If they were going to use my words against me, I could play that game too. The cruise was emotional torture. Surrounded by happy families, I could only think of the betrayal waiting for me at home. But I also used that time to strengthen my resolve. When I returned 5 days later, I acted as if nothing had happened. I enthusiastically told them about the trip, showing them photos and gifts. They smiled, but I could see the impatience in their eyes. As I suspected, things in the house had been subtly moved. My desk documents were in a different order. A few minor pieces of jewelry were missing, but I pretended not to notice, playing the part of the absent-minded old woman. Over the next few weeks, I began my own silent investigation. I met with my trusted lawyer, Joaquin, and told him I had started to question the people I trusted. He understood immediately. I also started secretly recording every interaction with Gabriela and Diego. The most revealing discovery happened when I decided to follow Diego one afternoon. I tailed him to a cafe across town, where he met a young woman with 2 small children. My heart stopped when I saw him hug her and kiss the children as if they were his own. They called him Daddy. He was living a double life. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Diego wasn't just stealing from me to fund his life with Gabriela. He was supporting another family in secret. My daughter wasn't just his accomplice. She was another one of his victims. That night, my hidden recorder captured them planning their next move. "We could hide her blood pressure medication," Gabriela suggested. "If she feels dizzy or confused, it'll be easy to convince anyone she's losing her faculties." The cruelty took my breath away. They were willing to risk my physical health. The war had begun, and they had no idea their opponent already knew their entire strategy. The confrontation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had arranged for Gabriela to visit alone. I served coffee in my best porcelain set, every gesture calculated. "Mom," she began, "Diego and I think it would be good for you to talk to someone. Dr. Ramirez knows some very good psychologists." I set her cup down. "Gabriela, can I ask you something? Why did you tell Isabel I was having memory problems?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. "I was just worried, Mom. And Dr. Ramirez? Were you so worried you had him come over without me asking?" Her hands trembled. "And what about the bank? I found out someone has been inquiring about my accounts, asking how to transfer funds in case of mental incapacity. Isn't that strange?" She stood up abruptly. "Mom, I think you're misinterpreting things." "Am I?" I turned to her with a cold smile. "Then maybe you can explain why my grandmother's pearl necklace is missing, or why you have copies of my house keys that I never gave you." Just then, Diego let himself in with his key. "What's going on here?" he asked, sensing the tension. "Your wife was just explaining why she thinks I need psychological help," I replied calmly. "And I was telling her about my visit to the bank." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. "For instance, I understand you've been visiting a woman named Rosalia on Wednesday afternoons. A woman with 2 children who call you Daddy." The color drained from his face. Gabriela stared at him in genuine shock. "What is she talking about? Hasn't your wonderful husband told you, dear?" I continued. "Diego has been maintaining another family for at least 3 years. How long have you 2 been married?" 6 years? Gabriela whispered, the realization dawning that her marriage had been a lie from the start. "Which means Diego already had this other family when he married you." "This is not your business, you meddling old woman," Diego snarled, his mask finally dropping completely. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was my lawyer, Joaquin, and a woman I didn't recognize. "Gabriela, Diego," I said, "I'd like to introduce my lawyer, Joaquin, and Detective Elias, the private investigator I hired." The shock on their faces was palpable. The detective opened her briefcase. "Mr. Diego, we have been investigating your financial and personal activities. We have photographic evidence of your meetings with Rosalia Mendez and her children, bank records, and documentation of your fraudulent employment. How long have you known?" Gabriela whispered to me. "Since the day I left for my trip," I told her. "When I came back for my passport and heard you planning to steal my life." I went on the trip, but not before installing hidden security cameras throughout the house. Joaquin opened his own folder. "We have video of you both going through Elvira's private documents, photographing her belongings, and removing valuables. We also have audio recordings of your plans to have her declared mentally incompetent." As Diego began to protest, the doorbell rang again. This time, Joaquin opened it to reveal Rosalia, Diego's other secret partner. "I need to speak with Diego," she said, her voice shaking. "I just found out the truth about you." Gabriela stared between them. "I'm his wife," she whispered. His legal wife. The silence was deafening. Rosalia leaned against the wall, stunned. The full scope of Diego's deceit unraveled for everyone in the room. He had been stealing from me to support his double life, manipulating 2 women who had believed his lies. Gabriela slowly walked over to Diego and slapped him hard across the face. "You liar! You thief!" she screamed. You turned me against my own mother for money that wasn't even for us. Soon after, police officers arrived. Diego was handcuffed, his protests of innocence sounding pathetic as they led him away. Gabriela collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. Rosalia stood by the window, watching the man who had destroyed her life get taken away. Joaquin approached me. Elvira, you handled this brilliantly. But how are you feeling? Relieved the truth is out, I said honestly, but devastated by everything that's been lost. The detective added one final, chilling detail. Our investigation revealed he was exploring similar schemes with other widows in the community. Your courage likely saved more people from becoming his victims. 6 months later, I was sitting in my favorite cafe with Isabel. Diego's trial ended last week. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Justice had been served, but the emotional wounds were still healing. My relationship with Gabriela was strained. She was in therapy, working 2 jobs to pay off the debts Diego had left her with. We spoke occasionally, the first tentative steps toward a forgiveness that would take a long time. But an unexpected friendship had bloomed. Rosalia and I had grown close. She turned out to be an incredibly strong woman. Her children now call me Grandma Elvira. It was strange how something so destructive could create such an unexpected connection. I had found a new kind of family through the betrayal of my own. And your travel plans? Isabel asked with a knowing smile. I have a tour of Greece booked for next month, I said proudly. And Rosalia is going to house sit for me. Life had given me exactly what I needed. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted. I was rediscovering who Elvira was as an individual. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I looked at myself in the mirror. It was the same 66-year-old face, but the eyes held a new strength. My life was full of new possibilities. I was alone in my house, but for the first time in a long time, that solitude felt like freedom, not abandonment. I had survived the deepest betrayal imaginable and had emerged stronger and wiser. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought, today I am alone, but finally I am at peace.